Sigmund Freud wasn't just the father of psychoanalysis. He was a pioneer who dared to explore the darkest corners of the human mind. Born in 1856 in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, he was raised under strict religious traditions. But his restless intellect quickly began to question the beliefs he had grown up with. Though born into a Jewish family, Freud never practiced the faith and eventually became one of its fiercest critics. His deep dive into neurology and his fascination with the unconscious led him to see religion as far more than just a set of spiritual beliefs. Freud didn't view religion solely as an institution. He saw it as a symptom of the collective psyche. In works like The Future of an Illusion and Moses and Monotheism, he argued that belief in the divine operates as a psychological defense mechanism, a way to cope with the uncertainty and existential dread of being human. To Freud, gods were emotional projections, idealized father figures designed to provide protection and comfort. Religion, through Freud's lens, wasn't a revealed truth, but a creation of the unconscious mind meant to soothe our anxiety in the face of life's chaos. His critique of faith wasn't cold or dismissive. It was a deep investigation into why humanity clings so tightly to the idea of a higher power. Freud wasn't trying to prove or disprove the existence of God. He was trying to understand the psychological role that belief plays in the human experience. Still, his conclusions weren't comforting. To Freud, religion was an illusion, not in the trivial sense of a mistake or a fantasy, but in the psychoanalytic sense, an unconscious wish projected onto reality. In The Future of an Illusion, he explained that religious belief doesn't stem from logic or evidence, but from a deep psychological need to feel safe. Freud saw religion as a mental response to life's unpredictability. The world is chaotic, full of risks, with no guarantees. Nature is indifferent, death is inevitable, and life often feels like it offers no clear answers. In the face of all that uncertainty, the mind reaches for an authority figure who promises safety, and that figure is God. This psychological process, Freud argued, mirrors childhood. A vulnerable child relies on their parents to survive. They lay down rules but also provide love and protection. Religion, in this sense, becomes an extension of that dynamic. God is the idealized father figure, watching over us, laying down laws, offering comfort. Faith in a higher power, then, is a magnified version of the child-parent relationship, expanded to a cosmic scale. But this dependence comes at a cost. When a person relies on a higher authority to give life meaning, they never fully mature. They remain in a kind of psychological childhood, unable to face uncertainty or take full responsibility for their own existence. For Freud, this made religion a deeply human phenomenon, but also a serious obstacle to personal growth. Rather than confront the harshness of reality, people cling to the comforting promise that life has a greater purpose, that death isn't the end, and that someone out there is watching over them. The mind chooses comforting illusion over painful truth. But Freud didn't see this self-deception as harmless. On the contrary, he believed it kept humanity in a state of emotional dependence, preventing people from achieving true autonomy. In Civilization and Its Discontents, Freud pushed his critique even further, comparing religion to obsessive-compulsive disorder. Just as a person with OCD creates rituals to ease their anxiety, repeatedly washing their hands, counting, or reciting phrases, humanity, he argued, developed religious rituals to cope with its deepest fears. Prayers, sacrifices, strict moral codes, and sacred ceremonies were expressions of this collective compulsion. To Freud, the comparison between religion and neurosis wasn't just a metaphor. It was a serious psychological analysis grounded in the workings of the unconscious mind. Religious dogmas served as tools for controlling the most primal urges of human nature. Concepts like sin, guilt, and divine punishment weren't responses to inherently evil desires, but social mechanisms meant to suppress impulses for the sake of order. The problem, Freud argued, is that this repression led to a constant state of inner tension. Religion didn't liberate humanity. It trapped it in a cycle of guilt and anxiety. Our instincts didn't disappear. They were just buried under layers of moral rationalization and fear. Even the most devout believers, despite adhering to religious rules, continued to experience desire, anger, and ambition. But they were forced to disguise these feelings in the language of morality and shame. And because religion often frames its commandments as absolute and unbreakable, individuals found themselves in painful contradiction, longing for things they were told they must not want, battling themselves, and often carrying paralyzing guilt. Freud didn't see religion as a path to spiritual enlightenment. He viewed it as a cultural pathology, one that kept humanity locked in a state of inner conflict. Faith, in his view, didn't just suppress personal impulses, it also operated as a powerful tool of social control. In The Future of an Illusion, he laid bare how religion has historically been used to shape behavior and maintain order within society. According to Freud, religious dogmas aren't merely personal beliefs. They are powerful structures that dictate what is allowed and what is forbidden, using both fear and hope to justify obedience. The promise of heaven and the threat of hell, he argued, are among the most effective psychological tools ever invented. Unlike human laws, which can be questioned or changed, religious rules are presented as absolute and eternal. To challenge them is to commit heresy or sin, making dissent impossible from within the system itself. Freud saw religion as a subtle yet profoundly effective form of domination. If people believe in an all-seeing entity that monitors every action, there's no need for constant policing or surveillance. Religion installs an internal judge in the mind of every believer, making self-censorship more powerful than any external repression. This control goes beyond behavior. It shapes identity. Religion doesn't just dictate what people do. It influences how they think, feel, and even fear. It defines what is sacred and what is profane, what is right and what is wrong. For Freud, the psychological cost is significant. It limits critical thinking and reduces the individual's ability to form their own understanding of reality. If everything has already been declared by a higher authority, little room remains for intellectual freedom or self-discovery. In Freud's view, the search for truth becomes an act of rebellion in a culture rooted in faith. To question religion is not just to doubt a belief system, it is to challenge the social order itself. In The Future of an Illusion, he argued that faith not only controls and represses, it also infantilizes. It keeps the individual from reaching full psychological maturity. Just as a child turns to their parents for comfort and direction in the face of uncertainty, the believer seeks refuge in God against existential anxiety. But this dependence, Freud warned, comes at a cost. It traps humanity in a mindset that is emotionally immature, unable to face the rawness of reality without illusion. Religion offers a comforting promise that there is a plan, a purpose behind suffering, and someone who watches over us. But for Freud, that's precisely the trap. In his view, life is chaotic and indifferent. There are no guarantees of justice, no built-in meaning, no higher design. Accepting this is painful, but it is also the first step toward true psychological adulthood. Believing in a higher power may ease the fear of existence, but it robs the individual of the chance to fully own their life and their choices. This argument is uncomfortable because it implies that deep down, we prefer illusion to truth. For Freud, faith wasn't a rational decision. It was a defense mechanism, a psychological response to the deep vulnerability that comes with being human. Facing the void without the promise of cosmic meaning, or the comforting idea that everything will eventually make sense, is no easy task. Yet for Freud, maturity does not lie in seeking consolation, but in confronting reality without illusions. To him, maturity isn't about believing what soothes us. It's about daring to live without imposed certainties. Beyond infantilization, Freud saw religion as an obstacle to genuine freedom. Faith, in his eyes, was not only a source of relief, but also a means of submission. Believing that morality stems from divine rules and that salvation lies in obedience rather than reflection means surrendering autonomy. For Freud, true freedom comes not from blind adherence to doctrine, but from understanding the forces that shape us and choosing to act with full awareness. Though religion presents itself as a guide to virtue, in practice it limits autonomous thought, preventing individuals from developing their own values. By imposing an absolute moral code, it narrows the space for personal ethics to grow. For Freud, maturity isn't about following rules out of fear or the hope of reward. It's about consciously choosing how we want to live and what kind of person we wish to become. But that kind of freedom is frightening. Rejecting religion means assuming total responsibility for one's choices, without the comfort of a pre-written moral script. Without a God who punishes or rewards, we become solely responsible for our own destiny, and that autonomy can be terrifying. It's easier to obey than to question. It's more comforting to believe in a divine purpose than to face the uncertainty of existence. Freud argued that religion offers a sense of security, but at the cost of our autonomy. The deeper question is, are we willing to let go of that security and embrace the weight of freedom? For him, religion was not merely a comforting illusion or a tool of social control. It was a mirror reflecting our fear of uncertainty. The promise of a God who gives meaning to suffering, of an absolute morality to guide us, and of an afterlife to soothe us is far too seductive to give up easily. Even when reason begins to question faith, faith often finds ways to reinvent itself, because it fulfills a deep human need for order in a chaotic universe. Yet Freud saw this not as a solution, but as a barrier to psychological growth. Clinging to these illusions, he believed, keeps us dependent and distances us from a life lived in full awareness. Freud's proposal wasn't to replace religion with another belief system, but to adopt an approach grounded in knowledge, self-exploration, and an unflinching acceptance of reality. His goal wasn't to destroy faith, but to ask why we need it, what void it fills, and whether we are capable of living without its shelter. This is where his critique becomes most provocative. What remains when we abandon religion? We are left with full responsibility for our existence, with no gods to protect us and no preordained destiny to follow. We are left with only ourselves, our choices, and the burden of creating meaning on our own. Our contradictions and the challenge of making sense of life without imposed structures may not provide comforting answers, but perhaps they are the only path to true freedom. After all, what is more frightening? To live in the illusion that a purpose awaits us, or to face the fact that we alone are responsible for giving our lives meaning? That is Freud's ultimate provocation. Do we have the courage to live without absolute certainties? To let go of the comfort of believing in something greater and instead embrace doubt, inquiry, and complete responsibility for our lives? Maybe true maturity isn't found in seeking definitive answers, but in accepting that some questions will never have just one. Freedom doesn't come without a cost, and growing up means letting go of comforting illusions to face reality in all its complexity. And you, what do you think about this? Do you agree with Freud, or do you see things differently? Share your thoughts in the comments. Let's start a conversation. If this video made you think, don't forget to leave a like. Thanks for watching. I hope this video sparked reflection and invited you to question different perspectives. If you enjoyed the content, be sure to give it a thumbs up and share it with anyone who might also find it meaningful. And to keep following more discussions like this one, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Your engagement is essential to keep this space of dialogue and learning alive. See you in the next video.